Hello, everyone. My name is David. I come from Toronto, Ontario, Canada, and over this next year, I decided to take the year off solely towards self development. And along the way, I've met a lot of interesting people. One of them is this guy named Alex I met in Mexico, where I'm living right now in Playa del Carmen. And we did an ayahuasca retreat together. And our experiences, I thought, were something that um, should be shared, and I hope that you all enjoy this content. And I intend in the future to be living in a lot of different cities and meeting a lot of different people. So hopefully I can continue this along the way. So if you find that you learn something, yeah, I hope that maybe you listen to some more content in the future and stay positive and happy.
I could feel good if I wanted to put all that focus into feeling good right now, feel
Yeah,
happy. I could have in a snap. It wouldn't have been difficult.
I'm here with Alex, and Alex is someone that I met traveling in Mexico. We did an ayahuasca retreat together. And Alex is the type of person that is ultra positive, I would describe. And he
Mhm.
has shown an extensive amount of willpower throughout the retreat. It was really impressive to see him grow throughout this time. And yeah, today we are going to be talking a little bit about the military, and we're going to be talking about social psychology. So I hope you guys all enjoy. And Alex, I'll take it to you. Why don't you share a little bit about who you are, where you come from, and yeah, maybe a little bit about your experience during the ayahuasca retreat.
Well, first, thanks for that wonderful experience. It's cool to see how people view me from an outside lens. I try to be, I guess, ultra positive. That's my ideal. A sort
Yeah.
of you ever hear of One Piece, the comic, the manga, the anime?
No, no.
All right, but the main character is someone that I like. I'm gonna get a tattoo of him. That'll be my first tattoo. Someone that
Oh,
I
nice.
really idolize. Just super like excited to be alive, sort of character. Um, so that's what I strive to be. But what's really cool is during my ayahuasca retreat, on the last ceremony, I just kept asking to see what I needed to see most. And what it showed me wasn't this ultra positive view. It wasn't what I had during the second ceremony, which was very much going down that path of super positive, very much enjoying the process. The third time was a sort of self inflicted hell.
Yeah.
And every time I kept like refocusing on my intention, it just kept pushing me to dive deeper and deeper into pain. But I was thinking about this the other day that the first time I dove into pain, but it's not what I wanted. I felt more like prey, like I was trying to run from it. But this time I felt more in the predator circuitry, like it hurt like hell, but I wanted to keep pushing further and further and deeper and deeper. And at the end I felt like someone was just banging on steel like a blacksmith, and it showed me that there was a sort of flaw I had. At least that's one of the lessons I think it was trying to show me. It certainly feels that way. That one of
Yeah.
the flaws in my ideal of just super happy, super excited is that sometimes the best thing to do, what you need to do most, is just dive headfirst into suffering, into pain, whether or not you find a way to do it happily or whether or not it's even right to do it happily. Like sometimes it's right to be in a hell of a lot of pain, maybe even miserable, and keep pushing through. So
Mhm.
that was a weird thing I've been trying to integrate into my ideal self lately.
Wow,
Um
that's incredible. And what would you say is like your motivation behind that? Like when you feel like giving up, like how do you keep going? Like what do you tell yourself?
in that instance, on the third ceremony, it was the main thing that probably kept pushing me forward is I would regret it if I didn't.
Mm.
And because the shamans kept saying, if you're not sure if you need to take more, take more.
Yeah.
And
You learn pretty quick.
yeah.
They extend to that. Yeah.
Especially the first and second night, the extent for me was I my body would ask, I would ask, but I
Yeah.
wouldn't give into it. I wouldn't trust that advice. And on
Mm-hmm.
the third night, I was thinking, you're going to regret it if you don't listen to that advice at least once and
Mm-hmm.
just keep going back for more, back for more. So regret, I found, is one of like the worst pains life has to offer. I try to find the way to get the highest quality of life possible, and regret seems to be like the antithesis to that. It seems to be the thing that will drain life quality. It'll bring you down the road to regretting even being alive, maybe,
Oh
or
yeah.
something like that.
Yeah.
So that was one of my motivators to just fuck
Mhm.
that.
Honestly, but yeah, you really appreciate it at the end because like I felt like after every experience, at least for me, and then I saw it within others, like there was just a sense of relief because it's almost as though people were suffering so much during that time that by the end of it, everything else in life just seems so easy. Yeah.
That is
And
something
that
that's
was
kind of cool.
beautiful, you know, it's really cool to
Yeah.
see just like how light people were the next day or even by the end of the trip. They're just like, wow, like I did this. Whatever I'm dealing with in my everyday life is just minuscule. And then I guess like a good segue into that would be uh like if you were to try and convince somebody to do it, how would you try and motivate them? Like what would you say to try and convince them that they should do it? For
Like
sure.
I was a salesman at one point in my life for personal training, but I didn't really believe in the product. I felt it was overpriced and things like that. So I always felt iffy about selling it to someone, trying to persuade someone to do it. And I wouldn't want to do it with something like this. I would, because I feel like that might make it not a healing experience if someone gets there and they were expecting this beautiful, what the beautiful sales pitch was, and then they came face to face with purging over a bucket.
Yeah, yeah, yeah.
But no, that would be it. Just tell them the best and worst parts, and if they still want to do it, then it's right for them.
For sure. And
What
then
do
I
you
guess
think you would
like,
say?
sorry?
What do you think you would say if you're sharing it with someone who you wanted to do it? You thought it
Oh, I
would be
wanted.
amazing to do it. Mhm.
Well, I've been talking with a few friends about it lately, and it's taken like no convincing at all. But I think that's that's in part due to like maybe the people I'm friends with because they're all oriented around self development and like challenging fear. But for someone who's not ready for that, for someone who's just like so identified with their fears and so absorbed in their inner world, I would probably tell them not to do it. It's probably going to worsen them in a lot of ways because it kind of enhances your, what I found for me is like it enhances your thought process and like how your brain works. It puts your brain in overdrive and then that kind of like helps you see your brain for what it is. Like for me, I found like the more medicine I took, the more obsessive became about certain thoughts. And that kind of like helped me realize how in my everyday life I do the same thing, like how I obsess about certain things and I don't know like how to, or like I don't know where to draw the line. Like I'll become, for example, I'll become obsessed with the idea of like living somewhere new or like traveling somewhere new or experiencing something new instead of being satisfied with what I have.
Mhm.
And just that with that sort of like helped me open up my perspective to like appreciating for what I have now and just like settling somewhere and making the most of the community that I'm with here. And that like was also influenced by like the book Tribe, which you also read, and like how the impact of community can shift your overall mental health. And I'm very focused on mental health. Like I focus on diet, sleep, exercise very rigidly. And one thing I noticed lately that I've been neglecting is like the power of community and the power of camaraderie and support. And that's something that also opened up my eyes during the retreat. Is like how people can come together and collectively have their suffering all bottled up and not have judgment and just be there for one another. And that's something that you'll never see in society. And it was like, I think probably like the biggest part of healing is the community we had. Because if you took ayahuasca on your own, fuck, who knows where you would have gone, right? Like, but that support and that camaraderie was just like such an eye opener for me. And I think if somebody is ready for that, then they should do it 100%. But just doing it outright just for the sake of it, without any training, without any like, because I had a lot of mantras and like things going on in my head to keep myself grounded and at peace with myself. And if I didn't have that, and if I was just coming in from pure suffering, that would have probably been inflated tenfold. So, like, I don't know for you, but like during the process, when she was telling us, like, oh, it's a part of the process, it's a part of the process, like, you're going to be suffering, just keep going, just keep going. Sure, that's helpful. But if I'm dying inside, that's not really helping me deal with all the shit. Like, if I don't have an understanding of like forgiveness or acceptance and what that really means, and until somebody's telling me to feel it, like, I'm not going to feel it. Like, it's something you have to train, right? Wanted to get your opinion on this as well in regards to the book Tribe, because they talk about war and they talk about how it's kind of like made people feel more at ease with life, and like have they have like more of a sense of purpose. And that sense of purpose is derived from like a collective idea that they need to work towards. And the in the book there, he's saying how that's sort of neglected nowadays, and how humans are kind of like lost in a sense because they don't have that purpose, they don't have that drive. But my conflict throughout this book was how, the army is important, and the army provides like a lot of acceptance and non-judgment. But at the end of the day, like, the concept of war is very negative. So that sort of like, it doesn't really tie into my values. So it's hard for me to fully accept that. And I was wondering what your take on this. Do you think that not like war is good, but that, I guess, like, in a sense, people are too comfortable in society now? And like, do you think that like perhaps there needs to be, I guess, like less security for people in a way, so that they have that drive to actually improve themselves instead of just being so comfortable that everything's like laid out for them? Like, are things too easy? Like, as like things get better and better, like technically, yeah, like our health's improving, our society's improving, but then mental health is also going down because people, they don't have like, they don't have a drive to improve themselves. So they're shifting that drive towards something negative. Like, they're being negative towards, I don't know, like other races, or they're being negative through ideas, like they're focusing on Trump or like whatever it is. Like, they're trying to like find a tribe essentially.
There's a quote that kept popping into my head as you were saying this. It was something to the effect of humanity is going to need a moral equivalent to war in the
Yeah.
future. And it seems to me that one form of that is sports. Um,
Oh,
but
that's true.
as
Yeah.
far as war simply being a very important goal that a community comes together and aims at, that seems to be very important. And I don't think I definitely don't believe that has to be literal violence and death and what war used to be, the old idea of war. When this is kind of corny, but Sandra kept saying you guys are warriors of light, warriors of love. That really connected with me because I think that's going to be the new war. I think that's going to be that is right now the current great world war. It's the war for this sounds so silly as I'm saying it, but damn, it feels right. The war for love, the war for
Mm.
light, and to have people kind of collecting together to aim at creating a world where, like you said, people's mental health is going down, where people can feel happy. There is, you know who do you know who Wim Hof is?
Oh, yeah, yeah.
Yeah. And first off, I thought it was really cool to see that a lot of the people I admire on the internet, you also seem to be tuned into the Goggins, the Wim Hof, that sort of thing. It's cool to see a fellow person who's like, I guess, at war with feeling shitty.
Yeah, yeah. It all
Fuck
factors
yeah.
into the amount of investment, right?
That was actually the second thing I noticed on my ayahuasca trip, or the thing I noticed during my second ceremony was, so they said be nothing, like the just do nothing, feel nothing, but then also tap into these four pillars of love, light, peace, gratitude. And so that was weird. Like, how do you do both nothing and then focus on those things?
Yeah.
And what they said was, well, when something negative pops up, essentially process it, whatever that means. That's still kind of vague to me, but process it, achieve a point of like a emotional neutral, and then build up from there with these four pillars. And when I did that during the second experience, it really did make it feel amazing. Like you're saying, when you put as much work as I did the first time into feeling miserable, if I put all that focus, all that energy directed towards feeling good, man, it was
Mhm.
almost easy. But what was really fascinating, because I've been on the hunt for feeling good. Ever since I fucked up my leg, I lost like the first love of my life. And the first love of my life was being in the military, being special forces, going to actual war. Man, as crazy as it sounds, that's what I loved more than anything. The idea of going to war as one of the best soldiers the world has to offer. That
Wow.
was my love. But so I lost that opportunity. And so I was hunting like for purpose. I was hunting for feeling good, and feeling good not in a way that's addictive, that kind of comes, but then you're regretting it later, you're ashamed, all that shit. A way that's passionate, a way that's an everlasting joy through life. I've been hunting for that the past few years, and I've been making some solid progress, which is especially fascinating that the third experience, when I said my mantra was constantly, God, show me what I need to see most. What does God need me to see most? Which broken down is just, what do I need to see most? What do I need to do most?
Yeah.
And that I could see when I was in the middle of it, I could feel good. If I wanted to put all that focus into feeling good right now, feel
Yeah.
happy, I could have in a snap. It wouldn't have been difficult. But when I kept like, what do I need to see most? What do I need to see most? It was pain. It was suffering. So when you say maybe has life gotten too comfortable nowadays, I think to a large degree it has. That's actually one of the hilarious struggles, but it kind of is a struggle that I face living in my house now. So jumping back for a second, Wim Hof has this quote that goes something like, "We have the ability to make the internet. We have the ability to make nuclear bombs. We have all these incredible technological advancements. We went to the fucking moon, but we don't know how to be happy, strong, and healthy as a
Mhm.
society. We've lost that." And that seems like such a basic part of thriving.
Yeah.
That's what I think the modern war is. That's what I think the current great world war is
Yeah.
figuring out how to make people happy, strong, and healthy. And to go, I went on a rant, but to
Oh,
kind of
it's it's
close it
it's
up.
it's really nice to hear, and like it reminds me a lot of the quote, a lot of the of this quote in the book where he says, "Today's veterans come home to find out, although they're willing to die for their country, they're not sure how to live for it." And I think that applies to like almost every facet of life. People are willing to die and like be there for others, but not for themselves. You
Not
know?
sure how to live for it. Hmm.
Yeah.
Not sure what to make of that. I wonder what we lost. And when I was in Mexico, it was so clear that we lost, at least in part, the shaman, the spirit
Well,
guide.
well, we're animals at the end of the day, right? People seem to neglect that fact. And if you think about it, like if you look at animals in a zoo, they exhibit similar symptoms to humans, like monkeys, killer whales, any species you can think of. You put them in a cage, they're going to be sad, anxious, depressed, all of that. They're going to be addictive. They're going to be violent. You name it, they're going to have that problem. Humans are the same. We're not meant to be living in a box. We're meant to be we're meant to be in the wild. That's
That's
why
funny that you say that, and we're both in boxes right now.
it's true. It's true. Like I got a garden right beside me, so I'm good.
Oh, beautiful. I just want to dive out the window now and just experience the grass and the sky.
For sure. Yeah. But then at the
Have you?
and to build on that as well, like we're essentially adapted mentally to be in groups of around 150, right? And we are a very social species because we're a species that's tied to apes. So having that comfort around each other and that understanding of acceptance is huge because it puts us out of fight or flight mode. And I think nowadays people are often living in fight or flight mode because they don't have a tribe, they don't have like a sense of camaraderie, they don't feel accepted because let's face it, the world is very judgmental,
Hmm.
and yeah, they're not in nature, and they're just absorbed into a world of comparison. So that can cause a lot of negative effects. And as a human, you can also, I guess, be positive in a sense because we operate, I think, very simplistically. Like it doesn't take much to make that tribe. You can make that tribe. You can also be in nature. It's all a matter of like choice. Because within any environment you live in, you have that choice. Like it's readily available for you. But people steer away from that because they think they don't need it. So it's like it's a constant struggle. But at the end of the day, what I learned in part through the ayahuasca, and you probably learned this as well, is the power of nothingness and just like the power of like understanding how a thought is just a thought and how it's accumulated because you got to think for however long you're 20, 21, I think. I'm
22.
30. We've been reinforcing things our entire life because by the time you're 7 years old, they say you've already created your perspective of the world. You have your fears, you know what you can do and you know what you can't do. And you have like the things that make you comfortable and you focus on that. When you're aware of that, you can reshift it. And that's what I have done like on an everyday basis is I've like written out myself letters motivating myself and reminding myself of how these are just thoughts because the thoughts thoughts come and go. They're not real. They're just like a figment of your imagination. Because in most cases, you've probably experienced this where you assume something about someone or you assume something that will happen in the future and it doesn't happen, like, or it's totally wrong. And I think that in a lot of ways applies to ourselves. Like we're able to do so much more than we could ever dream of. But we're just limited by those prior beliefs that we've sort of reinforced. And we have to dedicate ourselves just as much if we want to wire that out. Because it's not going to happen in a week or in a day or after a couple trips, although they'll be fun. It takes years to wire that out. And that's what I'm trying to like train myself. I'm like, okay, I've started my self-development journey when I was 29. So that means if I want to like be my full self, I need like 29 more years. And for some that's overwhelming, but it's like a reminder that like, all right, you got to see it as something that's a lot bigger than you could imagine because change is so difficult. And you're probably well aware that you can just fall back right back into the loop. And yeah, that loop can change for sure if you are just aware of how much time it took to create it and how much time it takes to get out of it. Yeah.
Why don't you live in a community like that? Why don't you live in a place with like 150 or 100 people?
Yeah, that's what I'm searching for right now. But then I'm also like battling that that ethical dilemma of like what's best for me and what's best for the world. Like technically it's best for me to like go live in like an ashram or somewhere where I'm meditating and doing yoga every day. But then I also am conflicted with like, all right, how productive is that for the world or how productive is that for myself? Like technically, yeah, I could go do it and just like forget about the world and live in my own space and be so happy. But you know, I feel that there's like a calling inside me that I can make a difference and that there's more for me to do. Because when we talk about all these issues and all these things that are going on in the world, they didn't change from somebody just meditating, right?
Hmm.
No, it's not going to change from somebody just meditating and just doing yoga by themselves. Sure, that someone it'll be inspirational, but it's not very proactive. And um, I'm trying to find that balance, that balance towards becoming the best version of myself, as well as in tandem providing that to others in some form, hopefully.
Hmm. You seem to be like at the point of it's the story of Buddha. Essentially, he's raised in a palace where he has all the pleasures of the world right at his doorstep. The most
Yeah.
beautiful people. His dad's a king, so he puts the most beautiful people, the most beautiful drugs, food, anything he could want inside this palace. Because his dad was told, your son will either be a great king or a great spiritual leader. The dad was practical. He wanted him to become a great king, not a
Mm.
spiritual leader. That seemed like some nonsense to him. But what's so interesting is that Siddhartha got curious about what laid outside the wall, even though he had, which to me it sounds like that equivalent is you being in the with the monks, you being in this state of just a weird, blissful, just kind of peaceful, happy existence. But it seems to me that, and I was kind of caught in this struggle too when I was hanging out with friends all the time. While this was a part of the story I left out earlier, when I was hunting for feeling better, hunting for purpose, something like that, there was a long period where all I really did was play video games, hang out with friends, and smoke weed. That was it. And that was my little bubble of happiness. But it started to feel so hollow. It started to feel like I was missing something really important. And I think that missing something really important is the same feeling that maybe you would be feeling inside of that temple, and that Siddhartha, who later became Buddha, was feeling inside of his own little castle, which he eventually traveled out of and went to see the world, even though it was full of pain and disgust and fear and all these things, also happiness. But it wasn't just a safe haven anymore. But like you're saying earlier, we are animals and it's important to remember our nature. I think that's part of our nature, diving into the unknown, diving into the hardship. That's a very satisfying part of it, especially when you learn to
Mhm.
be maybe even a master of it.
Yeah, yeah, definitely. It takes a lot of time, but I like how you described that through the story of Siddhartha, because it is easy to get absorbed into that opulence of, oh, like I don't need anything, I don't need anyone. But at the
Mm-hmm.
same time, it's kind of selfish because you've gained this awareness, or you've gained this like ability to manage yourself. It's not something that you should just withhold. Like people really struggle to change, and that's what I've come to learn, because I was working as like a mindfulness coordinator, and I had to like help kids like overcome their anger issues in schools, and I had to help them like basically help them like teach them how to socialize and how to interact with people in an appropriate way. And a part of that was teaching them how to meditate. And I also had to teach teachers how to meditate who have for like 40 or 50 years been absorbed in their problems. And imagine like telling somebody to do ayahuasca that doesn't want to do ayahuasca, like there was just so much judgment and so much, it was just like such a heavy load. But you know, like you said, like dealing with that fear and dealing with all those heavy emotions were often the most rewarding, because um going through that, I was battling with people's egos, and they were just giving me every reason why they can't meditate, why they don't want to meditate, why I'm not a good teacher. It was like defense mechanism after defense mechanism. But after the end of those 3 years, dude, I can tell you like the letters and the emotions of gratitude and thankfulness, man, like it put me to tears. Like I had so many people, like over 30 or 40 people come up to me, like, and I had no idea. Like I was just doing my everyday thing, grinding, 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 pushing, pushing, pushing. And they were fighting, but at the end of the day, they were making progress. Even though they wouldn't tell me, they'd go home, smile, and be like, damn, like I did it. And that's so cool to see, because a lot of times we think like, oh, we're annoying somebody, or the concept of accountability, it can be difficult sometimes, like, oh, like, but people feel it and they're actually thankful for it, and it does make a change, and I think that's why I didn't want to dip into the monkhood fully, because I knew that there was change out there, and I knew that people in the right circumstances, and then if you motivate them properly, they can change. And when it happens, it's like life changing. Like a lot of those kids that I worked with in Vietnam, they still meditate every single day, and they write me letters every month telling me like how they're progressing and how they've dealt with all these issues. So it's cool to see that, and it's also empowering.
I think the idea of the worldly monk is so much cooler to me than the idea of the monk who stays in the temple, like the monk who can maintain those disciplines, maintain those practices, and the most useful and beneficial things that are learned in the temple, but can do that in everyday life. Can somehow find a way to bring that to everyday life and just and the world at large.
Yeah.
I overheard your story with Pam, and I won't say the details of it, but I'll just say the banana, the monk and the banana. You know, and that was,
Yeah.
I think that's a really cool, underestimated part of many different ways of life, but in this part, the journey of the monk, who for
Yeah.
most of the life maybe only affects the people inside this temple. I don't know what kind of monk this was, if they were only in the temple or they were more worldly, but the point being someone that spends their whole life honing themselves and forming themselves into something that they end up changing the world or someone's entire life through one tiny interaction, and that's it. And maybe when you're talking about helping to change the world in a positive direction, I think it's just important to remember that sometimes that's the best way for someone to contribute. Just this one little tiny poke that nudges an entire life in a whole different direction, that it creates
Yeah.
like a ripple effect. The butterfly effect, right? The butterfly tiny flap creates a hurricane uh idea. And I don't know, I think it's just an interesting thing to counter the diving into the world idea with. That diving into the world is wonderful, but maybe sometimes to help the world most, being in the temple is what's needed most.
Hmm.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. Well, I think at some point I'll probably be in the temple for a little bit, because, when it comes to life, I think it's similar to like when you're on an airplane. You've probably heard this before. You got to put your mask on first before you can help others, you know?
Uh-huh.
Yeah. And I'm up there, but I don't feel like after, like I thought I was up there going into the ayahuasca ceremony, because like after my first trip, I was so happy. Um, but I thought it was pretty powerful when Sandra was talking about the ego and how it can sort of mask itself through love. And then I really started questioning whether or not my ego was doing that. Because when you delve into like meditation and stuff, you can really balance yourself, and you can really, I guess, just like numb emotions in a way, but you're not numbing them. You're kind of letting them go to the point where you don't feel anything, and you're kind of like always happy. I would describe it as like ecstasy without any weight.
That was
There's
one of
no
the
come
biggest
down.
like contradictions in my head. That when I felt nothing, when I felt like I was nothing, it wasn't exactly nothing, because I still felt happy. I still
Yeah.
felt like a tiny buzz of everlasting happy. So that really
Yeah.
makes me wonder, what does it really mean to tap into to nothing? That was something I was just puzzling over. Like I feel
Yeah.
like I feel
Well,
like if it
I
was
think the main concept is that it's the end of seeking, because you're not seeking an answer, and then the answer is there. And that's what the monk taught me in that situation. And when he's like, hey, do you want a banana, it's sort of like all my thought process went away, and it's just, I was living in nothing, where it's just like, oh, there's a monk in front of me with a banana and I'm hungry. I guess like a good Tibetan proverb towards this would be like, there's a monk who was once stuck on the edge of a cliff, and then there's two tigers who approached him, and he knew death was about to fall upon him. Yet he looked down and saw a flower and smiled. It's just like the simplicity that surrounds us
it really provides us with a sense of nothing. Because if you think about it, when you remove thought and when you remove any idea or label that you've created, the beauty and love that you seek through what's around you is already there. For example, when you look at a bird, you don't see a bird, you see what somebody told you is a bird. You see a bird that by definition looks like this and it flies like this, but you don't feel the bird. You don't notice the colors of the bird. You don't notice how it's moving differently maybe from the other birds. And there's a lot of, I don't know, there's a lot of beauty in that. But that beauty is lost through the thought process of that's a bird. And then we can also say the same when we live in the same place. We stop seeing those things because we familiarize ourselves with it, or we stop seeing people because we familiarize ourselves with them. And then that gratitude just goes away because we stop living in this concept of nothing in regards to like no, not a single thought, not a thing. And we start living in the idea of things where we just label and create ideas of what we think these things are. Like whatever you could, like you stop seeing a car or whatever it is in your life that you notice in every day. It's sort of become unimportant, right? Yeah. So that concept of nothingness I thought was really powerful because like it's good in a way because it strips like everything from you and it lets you just be totally happy and content with yourself and those around you because you stop labeling and you start like actually feeling the person and start feeling the energy that they have, and you start looking for a connection in everyone opposed to being selective over who you think you can be friends with and who you think you can't be friends with. And it really like strips that down and really opens up your mind towards what's around you. But at the same time, like what I've come to learn is it can also be used as like a mask, because you're living in this world of beauty and you have no worries, but at the same time, you're able to hide things through that. Like when you're so familiar with that feeling, you can just get a high off it, but at the same time, you could be punishing yourself in another way indirectly and not even realize it through like maybe like you eat a little too much food, or like maybe you, I don't know, treat someone poorly or whatever it may be. So that really opened up my eyes. Like I noticed like, oh, there's certain things I'm doing that are negative on others. Like for instance, I have an issue with like replying to people on time. Like I don't really like, I'm like, okay, my space is most important, but at the same time, like I don't really take into consideration how it makes someone else feel when I don't reply to them for a few days or whatever it is. And that's something I didn't really click in my head before. But then after the ayahuasca retreat, I started to become more aware of like how other people feel and how like maybe I'm pushing things on them through what I'm feeling. And yeah, like going off that ecstasy is great, but at the same time, you got to realize, at least for me, that you're living in a world of people that have feelings too, and you got to make sure that you're uplifting them all. You can't just be selfish and only feel good and then be, I don't know, the best version of yourself without taking into consideration of how you make other people feel along the way. Basically, don't be selfish. That's the main thing. So yeah, having nothing is great, but you got to make sure it's from a place, like you said, being a warrior of love, where you're fighting for other people to love, not trying to control them, but just providing them that love without bringing them down through whatever you've got going on in your life.
I was listening to a psychologist who focuses mainly on addiction, Gabor Mate, and one of the first things to say is that addiction is always caused by trauma. It's always some attempt to relieve pain and just cause some sort of relief from pain. And that pain is very often caused by a trauma, and he attributes it oftentimes to childhood, but it could be a trauma that happens later in life. And the relieving of this pain is ultimately not worth it, and it's difficult to stop doing. And that's what makes it an addiction. And so he describes it as, it's not the substance, it's not the cigarette, it's not the alcohol, it's not, well, you could be addicted to anything. I could be addicted to my phone, I could be addicted to exercise, whatever. But it's your relationship to that thing. It's your, yeah, it's as simple as that. It's your relationship to the thing that makes it an addiction or not an addiction. The difference between a passion and an addiction. This is kind of going back to what we were talking about earlier. I just wonder how to find, it seems like, I don't know if we as a culture, but at least I have sort of lost what it means, and I'm regaining it slowly, but lost what it means to have a healthy relationship with something, lost what it means to have a good relationship with something. And I'm still trying to wrap my head around what Sandra meant about ego can sometimes mask itself as love. And I feel like those two are tied. I have like a suspicion that those two are tied together, but it's hard for me to really wrap my head around what that truly means. And now my mind is getting all sorts of scattered. But
Well, I think I might be able to answer that, because at the end of the day, the ego works for itself, right? It's selfish. So love is the total opposite. Love is supposed to be, in its purest form, unconditional. But we live in a world of conditions, whereby if you do something for someone, you may say you don't expect anything in return, but you do. And the ego plays a part of that. Like, you may think that you are living a life purely and that you're doing things solely because you want to help others. But there's always a selfish reason behind it. And I think that's what she meant, is whether or not how you're living your life and how you're doing things, is it for you or is it for others? Because the ego can easily mask itself in a way to make you think like, oh, I'm doing good, and then make you feel good. But I think that's the paradox of people that become billionaires. They'll become billionaires and then they'll give all their money away, or they'll give some money away to some charities and think that all their problems are rectified. And then they, I have no ego, like I'm giving millions of dollars to these people, but at the same time, they're not taking into consideration of like the fact that they've had like child laborers creating all their products, and that they were like, in some way cheating and embezzling these people, and that they've caused all this corruption in third world countries. They're not taking that into consideration. So I think that's what she's talking about in regards to your ego, is finding a way in which to live by your purest form, which is not in some way also taking something away from others. Yeah. I don't know if that helps.
a little bit, yeah.
Yeah.
How do you define ego?
Ego. I'd say ego, there's a guru, I can't remember his name, but he describes it as it's edging God out. That's how he describes it. And what he means by that is you're essentially pushing away the inner form of love and curiosity inside of you. And that love and curiosity, I think, is in its most pure form in the eyes of every child when they're born. When you look at a young child, they're not filled with judgment and comparison and hate. They're open their eyes, they're breathing, they're the perfect meditators. They're technically like already enlightened. Yet we lose that, right? We lose that. So I think from that point on, from when we're children, that's the ego is created through the suppression of that, because our society kind of suppresses that in a lot of ways to, not be yourself in a certain way. Like you can't, whatever it may, like there's lots of issues nowadays. Like you can't be asexual, you can't be transvestite, you can't be this because it doesn't suit this, whatever it is. And that is formed through ego, when you're edging God out, when you're pushing away that love that's already inside you. And that's pushed out because of whatever suffering you have going on in your life.
When I as you were saying this, the definition for ego that I learned in psychology class kept popping up, and they seem to align very nicely, which goes something like ego it's how you identify yourself, and it's how you define you. And what's fascinating is that pairs very nicely to what you were saying about the bird earlier. when you look at a bird, but you think you already know everything there is to know about it. You have this definition, this clear box of this is exactly what a bird is. You lose that childlike mind, that baby-like mind, where it is a beginner's mind, a mind of, there's so much I don't know about this thing, but I've closed my mind off to all that because I think I know what it is. I have the definition of it. I have the ego of this thing. And it is really useful to wipe all of that away, if only for a moment, using this technique of nothingness. Because that was something that I had an inkling of this during my second ceremony in ayahuasca, that after I came back from nothingness, it seemed like what remained is what was most important. Like I wiped away the bullshit, and then what was worthy to emerge from nothingness was very, very largely worthwhile. It was almost like I felt like the puppy afterwards. You remember the puppy that was in the yard that was playing around? I was like, that puppy's a great teacher on how to be your true self, because I was focusing a lot on that the second ceremony. How do I be my true self?
Yeah.
And that puppy was like, no, if I'm bored of you, I walk away. If I'm enjoying our company, I'll stay and we'll play. If I'm hungry, I'm gonna go get food. Like it knows what it wants, truly, without some like hazy fog of, is this really what I want? Am I lying to myself? Am I being tricked or manipulated by this other person? It's like, no, this is what I honestly want, and I'm going to go do that now. And I thought that was something very worth learning from.
Definitely.
Yeah.
No, that's beautiful. They say puppies are like awakened animals. You know, because they're filled with self-love. They have compassion. They have all the attributes like we're striving for. It's incredible. And they're not
Yeah.
heavy. Like they're not like, I guess there are certain dogs that can become depressed and stuff, but a puppy when it's just growing up, like, oh, it's like the happiest thing in the world.
Fuck yeah. Oh, did you ever hear of the rat park experiment?
No.
The rat park experiment was, for a long time, when people tried to define what is addiction, how does it work, they would use this initial experiment, which was you put a rat into a cage and you have one bowl of water and you have one bowl of water that has opiates in it. And the rats would almost, without exception, go and drink up the opiate water if they were in this cage by themselves, which is a very important key. They would almost always become addicted and overdose and end up dying. But someone several decades later was like, okay, so this is how we treat addiction. We think if you have the opportunity to drink this opiate water, you're going to say, fuck the normal water, give me the drugs, it's the drug that's bad. But this guy was like, wait, this animal's very much out of its natural element. It's by itself in a cage with nothing to do aside from drink normal water or get high. And so it was pretty obvious to this guy, like, yeah, the rat's gonna want to get high. But he created something called Rat Park. And this was essentially like the amusement park equivalent for rats. They could play as much as they wanted. They could have sex as much as they wanted. They could go do just normal rat things. They had plentiful food. They were surrounded by plenty of other rats that were their family. And not a single rat overdosed. Not a single rat became addicted. The rat barely, if ever, few of the rats, if ever, would even drink it. And if they did, they would drink very little of the opiate water. And oh, sorry, I forgot to mention, they also put the opiate water and the normal water into this cage. And so I think that is a great metaphor for our society at the moment. Like you're saying with the zoo animals earlier, if you put the animal in the zoo, just in a cage, it's going to form a lot of deformities when it comes to mental health and maybe even physical health in some ways. The same with a human. When you're in a box, often you're sitting, you're by yourself. That's just the natural consequence of that. So when we're talking about what's the next war to fight, or what's the next really important goal, what should a warrior be aiming at, a modern warrior? Because old idea of war is outdated. We would just kill each other, the whole world, if we actually kept using that model. So instead, I think it's something like fighting to create that. Fighting, and maybe fighting is not even the right word, but I'll substitute fighting with using a lot of effort, putting our effort, our will towards creating a world that's maybe like a rat park. Because imagine if all this amazing technology that's trying to, in a lot of ways, capitalize on addiction. I'll see commercials for like candy or a video game, and it's so funny to see like it's positively addictive, and they say it like it's a good thing. Yeah, so to move away from that addiction model, to create a world like Rat Park. Like, what
Definitely.
if the best of our technology were aimed at that? How great could life be?
That would be beautiful. No, that was
Yeah.
really man, I've heard of that actually before. I didn't really get the title Rat Park, but yeah, once you described it, I picked up on it. And it kind of because I think that's what I'm also trying to create in a way too. Is create a rat park. Just create a community that's centered around stuff like this, self-development. It's hard to find.
Mhm.
Because people always have their different avenues, but wherever I go, regardless, I'm always like creating Facebook groups. Like I'll offer like free yoga classes or like free meditation classes.
Mhm.
Like people don't show up often, but the effort is there. The effort is
Mhm.
there. The intention. And
Maybe we could
regardless, like
create.
even if one person shows up, it's pretty beautiful. Like the other night, I went to a satsang, which is like it's kind of like a singing meditation.
Mhm.
And there's only like 4 of us there, but those who did show up, the connection was super strong. Like by the end of it, we were all like hugging each other, best friends, and that community was alive. And I was like, yes. Um, but if I was to like give advice to people, like going back to like ayahuasca, like yeah, sure, ayahuasca is important, but start with the community and then go from there. Because like who knows, maybe you don't even need ayahuasca in the first place. Maybe it's kind of like the opiates. If you're in Rat Park, you don't really need anything. Shit.
A lot of, but what would a human park look like? That name doesn't sound very
Oh,
good for me. Maybe like
no,
St.
that's a good way of putting it. A human park. I think that, yeah, I think a human park. Whew, I think it would probably be similar to just like an ashram, like a place where you just do yoga and meditate. Because there's one of the Beatles, I forget his name, I forget who it was specifically, but he went to Tibet and they had this whole like enlightenment movement because they were taking LSD and they wanted to see like the deeper meaning of life. So they met up with the Dalai Lama and they asked the Dalai Lama, like, all these people in the US, like mental health is becoming worse. And uh, what would you suggest towards dealing with this? Like how do your people deal with depression and anxiety and all of that? And they're like going back and forth in translation, and the Dalai Lama was very confused. And then after a while, they they found out that there's no word for depression or anxiety in Tibet. It doesn't exist because they've always dealt with their issues in coordination with dogma and Buddhism, and they've like had that collective community throughout their lifetime where those symptoms never became a part of their society and they never had to deal with those issues. And now I'm not
There's
sure if it's like, I don't know, maybe if I'm not sure if it's 100% accurate. I wouldn't say that no one in Tibet is depressed, but it's pretty, I don't know, it's pretty warming to see. And I think like if you also compare it to Bhutan, which is technically a country that models itself based off gross domestic happiness opposed to gross domestic product.
I heard about that though.
Yeah, they're pretty damn happy there, like, or even in Vietnam. I find just like a human park, I would describe as a place that is in nature and it's not overwhelming. It's not filled with too many decisions. Because when it comes to the concept of minimalism as well, I think that plays a huge part in mental health. And just having a place where you can cry and a place where you can smile and do whatever you want, where your emotions are free and non-judgment is there.
So
Creativity for
there's
sure.
a struggle in this that pops into my head that's very important for me to keep in mind. It was a story of Gandhi, and a true story of Gandhi. Gandhi wanted India, after it was freed from British rule, to be a collection of self-sustaining tribes that would be very much like 100, 150 people, and that would be the country, just a bunch of these tribes that would be self-sustaining and would occasionally communicate with one another and harmonize in that way. But when they got control, when India got back control of their country, and this was a historian describing it, a historian, Yuval Noah Harari, I would highly recommend it. It's very interesting. It wasn't practical because when you need to feed when you need to feed like 1 billion or 2 billion people, there is very little margin for error. And the system of government ended up being nearly exactly the same as it was under British rule because they weren't willing to test. They didn't think it would work. And on the chance that it didn't work, which I don't know if it would be very high. I imagine it would be surprisingly and maybe even a little bit depressingly high, that when you need to feed and protect and get all these resources to all these people, we don't know very many systems for doing that effectively. So I wonder, I think that might also be a part of this new war that's being fought to help humanity thrive. How to create a system of government that can practically, realistically provide people with these environments, these human parks, where we can live in this way, without having society collapse.
Yeah.
Yeah.
But then that's a really difficult paradigm because like at the end of the day, if if everyone decided to start meditating and just living by all these philosophies that we have, the economy would collapse realistically. Like if we lived, like the whole economy would collapse and a lot of people would lose jobs. And then you could say it would be for the better because like if you look at the corona times, the environment's been the best it's ever been. And like people have had to deal with their issues. You know, they weren't able to mask themselves through work and through whatever else they do to try and deal with their issues. They had to confront them. So in a way, I think it's something that is necessary and should happen at one point, but in the world we live in, it would be very difficult. It would be very difficult.
I guess that's why it's going to have to be a war. Maybe not.
Yeah. I think the war will just have to be within your own realm. Like there's people like us that exist all around the world. So maybe we need to come together and buy a shit ton of land and and just invite people.
I thought about just buying land in the mountains and get a tiny community with just like my closest friends and family and just have us live together. It's sort of self-sustaining way. But then again, there's a part of me that fears, I don't even know if fear is the right word, but there's a part of me that is deterred by, I think, the same problem that you were deterred by earlier when it came to just staying in the temple, right? The outside world, there are a lot of powerful forces that maybe don't want me to live that way, that would maybe benefit from me living exactly how I am now, if not even in a worse state. And I think it's very important to remember those forces and to find a way, I don't know, fighting or being very diplomatic with them, coming to the table and talking with those forces is the answer. But damn, I don't know.
Yeah, because you're always, I think, in some way going to be affected by those forces. Like I could live in a temple and I could live peacefully, but at the same time, the environment's going down. And like maybe there's some violence or crime that's going on in the area. Like, for example, I'm in Playa del Carmen right now, and then Tulum is technically like the perfect place for me. Like it has a huge yoga community, big on meditation. But at the same time, it's super dangerous right now because the cartel's taken over and there's robberies happening almost every other day. And there's a lot of murders happening. Like their murder rate has gone up like 300%, I think, this year. And that's the reality of the situation. So I can live in that world, but at the same time, there's issues that are not being confronted, right? And mental health is being ignored, whatever it may be. Like it's becoming more drug oriented, and there's more addiction and stuff. And it's great to live in that, that little shadow realm of comfort and ease and be with all my yoga and meditation friends. But it's hard to also ignore the reality of the surrounding circumstances. Like when you see whatever it may be that happens on an everyday basis, like getting a gun pointed at you or like seeing somebody being killed.
There's
Yeah.
the enemy gets a vote. That was something that really stuck with me that I heard a soldier say. That in whatever it is, the beautiful future that we want to build, the enemy gets a vote.
Mhm.
And yeah, do you ever see Lion King?
The Lion King, yeah, yeah.
You know the Hakuna Matata song?
Okay, yeah.
Yeah, like no worries for the rest of your days, just living
Yeah.
like problem free. That's our philosophy. But then what happens? The state starts to collapse around them, and one of the lions that used to be like one of the guy's best friends comes through trying to hunt them. Because I think that is, I don't know if it's always the cost for living that sort of lifestyle, but I think it's one of the potential ways it could go bad, something to look out for, which I need to remind myself because sometimes it's easy for me to get caught in the Hakuna Matata, which I think that's what the third ceremony was trying to show me in a lot of ways,
Mhm.
that to keep vigilant for corruption, to not forget that that is very much, there are bad actors out there that are constantly trying to gain a lot of power and influence the way the future is being formed. So
Yeah.
it's interesting, like how to pair the yogic monk lifestyle, which I think is very important. Like we need people like that and like shamans, like Sandra. I don't know how much she lives in a shamanic bubble, but I think it's very important to have people like her out there. That maybe the people that are in politics and the more the uh, like we seem to be very artistic in a very creative realm. Like we dive a lot into the unknown, the chaos. Like that seems to be where we
Mhm.
play, like as artists. Do you think that would be a fair description of you, like as
Yeah.
someone?
In some
Yeah,
form. I'd say everyone's an artist in some way.
I thought true enough. And then I think to like we're a little bit more on the extreme of more artists, and then on the other side you have the person who's like the 110 110. We are here to daily make sure politics runs. We are very much staying, maybe even within the ego, very much within defined reality, within the like the mathematical, very precise, exact realm. The people that build things, and I guess politics would probably be the best example of it. Someone who's literally running the country. But then I think there are people like us who are the shakers, who we kind of explore out. We see what other ways the world has to offer of life, and then we bring that back and like rejuvenate. And I'm taking this a lot from. Have you ever heard of Jordan Peterson?
Oh yeah, yeah, yeah.
Yeah, I'm a big fan of his, so I'm taking this a
Oh,
lot
nice.
from how he describes like the role of the artist in the world. Um, hmm. So even despite all this, the enemy gets a vote, and we have to be mindful of corruption. I still think it's important to go out and do our journey, go out and explore, and even at times, like we did for a week. For a week, I didn't worry about the world. I didn't worry about the future. I just worried about then and this ceremony and these experiences. Um, I guess all I'm really trying to circle around is it's important to have both of these things. Like every now and then, do your Hakuna Matata, but there seems to be a sense, like maybe it's a reflex, maybe it's a feeling that can tell you when you're riding the wave of life properly, when you're truly, and when I hear of the Tao, like the way, I think that's what it is. I think if you're on the Tao, the way, you are aligned with this part of you, this feeling that's trying to feel out, when am I balancing all these things in life properly? When am I balancing being in the moment with thinking about the future, with worrying about things, with being happy? Like, have you ever felt that? Like you're in the right place at the right time, doing the right thing. Like all this shit is aligned and moving in the same direction.
Yeah, yeah. It's kind of like manifesting, like when you have a thought about something and then eventually it happens. And Yeah, like you said, like you need to find that balance between, like, you can have the Kuna Matata moments, but at the same time, if you go up and hug a tiger, it's gonna bite your face off. Like, it doesn't matter. Um,
Yeah.
yeah. So with that in mind, like, I think boundaries is a big one, and just I guess like a general sense of awareness
Hmm.
of the situations you're putting yourself in. Like, I researched about Tulum prior to this before moving there, and I was thinking about renting a place for a month. And if I just went there on a whim of feeling good, like, oh yeah, like I'm gonna trust this and accept it, da, 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 who knows what kind of circumstances I would have gotten myself into. But now that I have that prior knowledge and I have that awareness, I don't have to put myself in that situation in the first place. So I think
Hmm.
that's a big part of it. Is, like, sure, you want to be able to accept it. And I'm fortunate enough to be able to make that decision, and someone may not be able to. But yeah, I don't know. At the end of the day, having that awareness, like not going out at 2 a.m., not buying drugs off somebody, like there's a lot of ways to avoid these circumstances. Um, so I think, yeah, that's a big part of it, is awareness.
I think we're like the modern hippie. Where when I think of the hippie in like the '60s, I think there was much more, at least from what I hear, right? Like I don't know, I wasn't there, but from what I hear, it's much more like just love all the time, man,
I
happiness all the
know. Yeah.
answer. But like, no, you're very right. It's like being manic. Like
Yeah.
everything's always going to be great, always, and just follow that, and that'll make life great. Like, no, that's how you
Mm.
spend all your money. Like, all these stocks are amazing to buy right now. Everything's gonna go great. Just buy, 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 and everything will turn out, and then you lose all your money.
Yeah.
So
Yeah.
yeah, it'll be
Definitely.
really cool to see how this movement of the war of love, something like that, will
Hmm.
ground itself practically in reality over time. Like, how are we going to refine this image of creating a human park? I wonder in the future, because damn,
True.
it's possible. Like, it's hard to see why it wouldn't be.
Yeah. Well, I think like Portugal is a good example of that. It's just like a bigger investment in others. Because, like, yeah, socialism is great. Like, I lived in Vietnam, and like it's like the top socialist, one of the top socialist countries out there, where they're trying to like do poverty alleviation, and China's working at the same time, but they're also causing a lot of suffering. But when you look at Portugal, they're prioritizing, what do you call it? People that are dealing with addictions and drug abuse. And I'm not sure if you're aware, but they legalized all drugs like a few years back, and their
Yeah.
crime rates and everything is overall improved as a result of that. And I think it's just a testament towards their investment. They're investing in communities, they're investing in therapists, they're investing in like things that they know that are going to help people deal with their issues. And I think that's what society needs to do overall, is it needs to make that investment towards others and be there for others and provide them with something where they can fall back on if they feel their worst. Because
Mm.
right now, if people feel their worst, they have nothing to do. Like, sure, you can get a therapist and talk on the phone and list out all your problems, but it's a lot different to actually have a community there, and to have a government that cares about that. So yeah, I think that would be the first step, is to like throw away all those investments in the military, trust
Mm.
other countries, and then just put all that money, billions of dollars, into therapy, I don't know, wellness programs, meditation programs. Like, there's a country, Mozambique. I'm not sure if you're aware, but in 2001, their president made meditation mandatory in the military, and in all, and like all police corps. He, like, everybody had to meditate 20 minutes in the morning and 20 minutes at night. And their economy actually improved, oddly enough. They expected a 5% growth that year, and it grew 19%. And their crime went down by 50%. Like, the statistics were insane. Like, everything overall just improved. So yeah, I think
Mm.
mandatory meditation, I'm for it. People will hate it, but I think, like, it's something that people, they work towards understanding why they do it once they're in it. And it's same to like going to the gym. Like, you go to the gym, the first day you hate it, but then if you like, if you have a personal trainer and if you have somebody that's there to motivate you and you see results, like I think people that you might know this better than me, but like people that have a personal trainer, they're like 10 times more likely to continue training on their own after, opposed to like starting on their own. And I think like when you look at the New Year's resolution groups going out there every year, they show up for a week and then you never see them again.
Yeah.
Yeah, I think that's kind of a reflection of the lack of community we have. So a human park for sure would be involving that.
For sure.
Oh, it's hard to say. How would you describe your human park?
My human park?
Yeah.
Definitely community. People that are close knit. People that, when I was doing jujitsu, I went to one school specifically that was only jujitsu, and those were like the nicest strangers I'd ever met. After you spent an hour trying to like choke each other out or get an arm bar. So there's something I think to doing a really difficult task as a group. Something about just doing an exercise together, touching one another, like all these things add up to, I think, and pair it with the right philosophy, right? Like we weren't there to kill each other. We were there to learn jujitsu, to respectfully spar with one another. So maybe something like that. And I hesitate to make it mandatory, but to have it there as an option, right? And I think people will naturally gravitate towards it as they see the wonderful benefits of it. They see all the people in it smiling, laughing, having a great time. And to jump on something you said earlier about people hating the gym the first time, this was something I really came to question, like the whole no pain, no gain mentality. I began to wonder how much is that truly necessary. I started to adopt more just having fun with my workouts when I would exercise. It wasn't like, and every now and then I'll still do like the push into the pain. But a lot of the time it's just finding a physical activity that I enjoy doing. And that seems to increase the probability that I'm going to keep doing it for a long period of time, especially when someone's starting up, especially when someone's forming the habit. I think it's important to make it enjoyable for them a lot of the time, so that when they think about exercise, they associate it with feeling good, and that'll like pull them into it, and then they'll see results, and then I think they'll be more willing to go into the pain if it's necessary. There's a great book called Grit on this partly on this subject, how to build up grittiness. So how to create that, a lot of freedom of expression, promoting being honest with people as opposed to having like this persona, this mask that I have over me so that I'm acceptable to millions and millions of people and I'm not offending people, being more willing to be offended, maybe being tougher. I don't know. That's curious. Now I want to like sit down and write out the blueprints for that for a while.
Yeah. It'd be cool. It would be cool to see what comes up.
Yeah, fuck yeah. Ooh, maybe we could make like a Facebook or some sort of group where people spitball and just have a brainstorming session writ large with a lot of people.
Totally,
That'd be cool.
that'd be sick.
For a split second.
Philosophy of life or something.
Yeah. Philosophy of prosperity, like how to thrive.
Oh, this is great, man. I enjoyed this conversation.